After 15 days away, he returns to find the mansion shrouded in an unusual silence. In the locked basement, he discovers his mother, frail, isolated, and covered in signs of abuse. The truth behind it all exposes a cruel plot that explodes into a national scandal. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The New York City night was quiet as Ryan Miller's plane touched down at JFK. It was 3 in the morning on a rainy Friday in November, and the exhaustion of the last 15 days weighed on his shoulders like an invisible burden he'd been carrying since he embarked on that seemingly endless business trip. 15 days of non-stop meetings in Dubai, where the suffocating desert heat contrasted brutally with the ice-cold air conditioning of the glass-walled conference rooms that seemed to float above the futuristic city. Presentations for Japanese investors who scrutinized every comma in the contracts with almost surgical precision, questioning financial projections until 3 in the morning. Business dinners that stretched late into the night, where every word had to be carefully chosen, every gesture meticulously calculated, because one slip-up, no matter how small, could cost millions in lost investments. 15 days away from home, away from the people he loved, away from the routine that, even in its chaotic and demanding nature, brought an indescribable comfort to his weary, successful executive's heart. Ryan wasn't one to complain about travel or commitments. From a young age, while still studying civil engineering at Columbia University, he learned that success came from sacrifice, that building an empire required painful renunciations, tough choices, and sleepless nights hunched over blueprints and budgets. His own father, who had passed away 8 years ago, always used to say in that deep, measured voice Ryan could still hear echoing in his memory, "Son, nothing worthwhile is ever achieved without breaking a sweat, without giving some things up." But on that cold November night, as the plane slowly taxied down the wet JFK runway, the city lights reflecting in the puddles of water on the tarmac, Ryan felt something different. An unease he couldn't put into words, a distressing tightness in his chest that had absolutely nothing to do with the accumulated physical fatigue or the intense jet lag that was already starting to take hold, leaving his body heavy and his mind foggy. It was something much deeper, more visceral, more disturbing, as if an insistent inner voice was whispering over and over that something was deeply wrong, very wrong, terribly wrong, and that every passing minute could be crucial. Ryan Miller wasn't just another successful businessman among the many who populated the commercial skyscrapers of New York. At 42, he had built a solid and respected real estate empire that began incredibly humbly with a small, cramped 2-room office on Fifth Avenue, sharing the space and expenses with 3 other equally broke and dream-filled, budding entrepreneurs. Over nearly 20 years of hard work and unwavering determination, it had transformed into one of the most respected, admired, and envied development firms in the entire country. Towering residential buildings that touched the gray Manhattan sky with their modern glass and concrete structures, strategic commercial developments that completely changed the economic and social profile of entire neighborhoods, and ultra-luxury condos that frequently graced the glossy pages of the most prestigious architecture and design magazines in the US and even abroad. His name, Ryan Miller, was engraved on polished bronze plaques strategically scattered throughout the enormous city, from the financial district to the upscale and bustling areas around Wall Street, through Soho and Tribeca. Influential business leaders wanted exclusive partnerships with him. National and international investors aggressively vied for his promising deals. The business press regularly called him a visionary, a natural-born entrepreneur, a man who turned concrete into gold. But none of that, absolutely none of that impressive material success and gratifying professional recognition held more real and profound value for Ryan than the 2 women who occupied the absolute and unshakable center of his heart, his mother, Eleanor, and his wife, Megan. They were the ones who gave true meaning to everything he built. They were the ones who turned that luxurious modern mansion on the Upper East Side into a real home, a welcoming refuge, and not just an expensive property coldly listed in his multi-million-dollar portfolio. Or at least that's exactly what he believed with all the naive sincerity of his heart, until that fateful night that would change absolutely everything forever, completely destroying the foundations of the life he thought he knew so well. His private driver was waiting patiently for him in the arrivals area of Terminal 4, holding a discreet and elegant sign with his name printed in black letters. Ryan gave him a brief, tired nod, carrying only a compact carry-on. He didn't have any checked luggage. He had learned over the years that executive trips were more efficient when you traveled light, with the essentials meticulously organized in a single bag that fit in the overhead compartment. He was deeply anxious to finally get home, to breathe the familiar air of his own city, to sleep in his own bed. Throughout the grueling trip through the Emirates and Japan, he had exchanged daily and frequent messages with Megan on WhatsApp, photos of exotic Arab food, short videos of important meetings, comments about how much he missed her and their New York routine. But in the last 3 or 4 days, her replies had become progressively shorter, almost monosyllabic, lacking their usual emotion and affection. "Everything's fine here. Your mum's fine, don't worry. Enjoy yourself." He initially attributed this sudden distance to her natural fatigue. After all, taking care of Eleanor alone during his extended absence was by no means a simple task for one person. His mother needed constant attention, companionship, and care that demanded genuine patience and dedication. Eleanor was 73, but she possessed an impressive and contagious vitality that completely defied any stereotype about age. Naturally white hair that she always kept neatly styled in an elegant bun, expressive brown eyes that shone brightly with wit and intelligence when she spoke, and a wide, welcoming smile that had the almost magical power to instantly light up any room she entered. A widow for exactly 8 years, since that terrible day her beloved husband, John Miller, passed away suddenly due to severe cardiac complications that the doctors couldn't reverse in time, Eleanor had naturally moved into her son's spacious mansion in the aristocratic Upper East Side. The decision was extremely natural and hardly needed discussion. Ryan was an only child, raised with all the love and dedication by that strong and wise woman, and the mere idea of leaving her all alone in that relatively large but empty apartment in Brooklyn was absolutely unacceptable and unthinkable to him. No, definitely not. She deserved to be near him, to be in the company of family, to live out her final years with comfort, security, and genuine affection all around her. The deep relationship between mother and son had always been extraordinarily special and unique. Eleanor had been a dedicated teacher of American and English literature for nearly 40 years in public schools, and it was she who had patiently taught little Ryan his first words, to deeply value the transformative power of well-chosen words, to understand that the world was immensely larger and more complex than the 4 limited walls of any house, no matter how comfortable. Even after he became a respected businessman, the owner of a solid and successful company, she remained his greatest and wisest advisor on practically all important matters of life. "My dear son," she would often say in that simultaneously calm and firm way that only truly wise mothers possess. "Money comes and goes like the ocean tides, but character, that remains etched into your soul forever. Never, ever forget that." And Ryan never did. He carried those words like an internal mantra that guided his toughest decisions in business and in his personal life. When Ryan finally married Megan exactly 7 years ago, in a luxurious and unforgettable ceremony, the initial cohabitation between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law seemed reasonably harmonious and promising. Megan was an undeniably beautiful woman, extremely elegant and sophisticated, exactly 10 years younger than Ryan. They met one memorable night at a charity gala held at the famous Apex Hotel, that iconic arch-shaped building in Tribeca that was an architectural landmark of the city. She worked as a public relations specialist for a reputable agency and had that irresistible natural charm that instantly drew admiring glances wherever she went. Their courtship was surprisingly fast and intensely passionate, like the best romances. In less than a year, they were officially married in a grand and emotional ceremony at a beautiful estate in the Hamptons, with 300 carefully selected guests, imported, flowers decorating every corner, and a party that lasted until dawn. In the promising beginning of their marriage, absolutely everything seemed perfect and harmonious. Megan appeared genuinely attentive to Eleanor, constantly asking about her health and well-being, organizing pleasant family lunches on Sundays, and including her mother-in-law in occasional shopping trips. But as the years inevitably passed, Ryan subtly began to notice small, worrying changes in his wife's behavior. Seemingly innocent, but slightly acidic comments from Megan about needing more privacy as a couple, visibly impatient glances when his mother gave her honest opinion on some domestic matter or home decor, long dramatic sighs when Eleanor innocently decided to accompany them to an important social event or dinner with friends. Small signs that, in isolation, seemed irrelevant, but together began to form a disturbing pattern. "It's absolutely normal, my dear son," Eleanor would say with that maternal wisdom, whenever Ryan discreetly asked if she was truly feeling well and welcome in the house. "Every daughter-in-law naturally needs her own space with her husband. I understand that perfectly, and it doesn't bother me." But there was something revealing in her tired eyes that Ryan couldn't quite decipher or fully comprehend. A deep, veiled sadness she desperately tried to hide behind polite and kind smiles. A growing loneliness she never verbalized, but was etched in every slower gesture, in every more distant gaze. In the last 6 or 7 months specifically, Ryan had noticed with growing concern that his mother was progressively quieter, visibly less engaged, almost reclusive. She, who had always filled the entire house with classical music playing cheerfully on the sophisticated sound system in the large living room, who simply loved spending hours baking delicious homemade brownies and cookies to offer guests, who used to spend entire afternoons relaxing, and reading her favorite books in the sunny garden under the century-old oak tree, seemed to be progressively retreating more and more to her room at the end of the second-floor hallway, only coming out for mandatory meals and quickly returning. When he asked her directly what was happening, she invariably deflected with mastery. "I'm just a little more tired lately, son. Age is catching up. You know how it is getting older." But Ryan knew intuitively, deep down in his conscience, that it definitely wasn't just that. There was something deeper and more disturbing happening in that house. Something he wasn't able to see clearly. The black car glided smoothly through the deserted and silent streets of New York in the cold early morning. The fine, persistent rain beat rhythmically against the windshield as the experienced driver carefully navigated the FDR drive towards the upscale Upper East Side, crossing illuminated bridges and empty tunnels. Ryan stared distractedly out the fogged window, watching the few yellow lights of the immense city reflected in the puddles forming on the empty sidewalks. He felt a sudden, inexplicable tightness in his chest, a deep unease he couldn't name or rationally justify. It was as if something invisible was pushing him, warning him, silently screaming that he needed to get there soon, that every second counted. He picked up his phone with slightly trembling hands and tried calling Megan again for the 20th time since he landed. It rang and rang and rang, nothing. Straight to automatic voicemail after 6 empty rings. He then sent a desperate text message. "Megan, I'm getting home now. Please answer. I need to know if everything's okay. I love you." Sent. 2 blue check marks indicating it was delivered. But no immediate reply appeared on the illuminated screen. It was exactly 4:15 in the morning when the car finally stopped smoothly in front of the tall black iron gates of the imposing mansion. Ryan quickly got out of the vehicle, thanked the driver with a quick nod, and stood there for a few seconds, intensely observing the property that was his home. The modern 3-story house, with its contemporary facade in elegant shades of grey and pure white, was completely plunged into absolute darkness. Not a single light on in any window, no visible sign of human life, no movement, deeply strange and disturbing. Even when he had to travel for long periods, Megan always, without exception, left the yellow light on the front porch on all night, a small, welcoming tradition she herself had started in the first few months of their marriage. "It's so you always know there's someone here waiting anxiously for you, my love," she used to say with that charming smile that had completely won him over from their first meeting. Ryan opened the heavy gate with the remote he always kept in his pocket and walked slowly up the cobblestone driveway to the imposing main entrance. His suitcase made a dull, rhythmic sound against the small rubber wheels. The impeccably manicured garden was perfectly in place, the ornamental plants meticulously cared for, the green lawn professionally trimmed. Everything absolutely in its place, everything exactly as it should be from an aesthetic point of view. But the growing, agonizing feeling that something was deeply and terribly wrong increased unbearably with every heavy step he took towards the solid wood door. He carefully opened the front door with his own key. The heavy silence inside the house was absolutely deafening, almost physical. There was no soft background music. There wasn't that unmistakable and welcoming aroma of fresh coffee that Eleanor always, without fail, lovingly prepared for the occasional early mornings when she couldn't sleep well. There were no human voices conversing softly, no light footsteps echoing through the hallways, no life pulsing. The enormous mansion seemed to have turned into a luxurious and cold mausoleum, a sophisticated tomb lined with marble and good taste, but completely devoid of soul. "Megan?" he called out in a relatively loud voice, leaving his heavy suitcase strategically in the wide marble entryway. His masculine voice echoed ghost-like off the high, empty walls. Absolutely nothing. No response. "Mom," he tried, again with growing desperation, quickly climbing a few wide steps of the marble staircase that led elegantly to the bedrooms on the upper floor. Absolute sepulchral silence was the only answer. Ryan nervously turned on all the possible lights in the immense living room. Everything was perfectly and disturbingly organized, with almost obsessive precision. The expensive beige sofas impeccably clean, the silk cushions aligned with mathematical perfection, the imported glass coffee table without a single smudge or fingerprint. He walked quickly to the open-plan kitchen, clean, absolutely gleaming, as if no one had cooked there for several days. He quickly opened the huge stainless steel refrigerator. It was full of various fresh foods organized on shelves, but no visible prepared dishes, no concrete sign of recent meals cooked or consumed. His heart began to beat noticeably faster and harder, his breathing becoming progressively shorter. He ran up the stairs desperately to the spacious second floor. The luxurious bedroom he shared with Megan was completely empty and silent. The king-size bed perfectly made with white sheets, the heavy velvet curtains closed, blocking any outside light. He quickly opened her huge walk-in closet. Many expensive clothes were still hanging there, but some pieces were definitely missing. Handbags, shoes, some everyday clothes. He picked up his phone again with visibly trembling hands and called one more time, straight to the annoying voicemail. "Mom!" he shouted now, almost desperate, his voice coming out hoarse and choked. He ran down the wide hallway to Eleanor's cozy room located strategically at the far end. The wooden door was completely closed. He turned the round bronze doorknob, locked from the outside with a simple but effective latch. His blood literally ran cold. Why on earth would his mother's room be locked from the outside as if it were a prison? What sense did that make? With a sudden violent movement fueled by growing panic, he persistently forced the lock with his muscular shoulder. The solid wood door resisted at first, but eventually gave way with a loud, dry crack. The room was completely empty of human presence. The double bed neatly made, the large windows closed, blocking the air, everything seemingly in perfect order. But his mother was definitely not inside. Her clothes still in the wooden closet, her beloved classic literature books on the nightstand, her gold-rimmed reading glasses on the bedside table, everything meticulously in its place, except her presence, except her life. Ryan went down the stairs again, now completely consumed by the deepest, most primitive panic he had ever felt in his entire life, a visceral fear that came from his gut. He desperately searched every possible room in the enormous house. The formal living room, the dining room with a table for 12, the office with mahogany bookshelves, the guest bathroom, the laundry room with modern machines, the organized pantry. Absolutely nothing, no sign of her. He called out loudly for Carla, the faithful housekeeper who had worked diligently in the house for exactly 5 years and knew every corner of that place. No human response. The gigantic house was completely and inexplicably deserted of any living presence. It was then in that moment of absolute desperation, that he finally heard it. A muffled sound, distant, almost completely imperceptible to less attentive ears, coming clearly from below, from the forgotten basement of the house. A low moan, or maybe a cry muffled by something, or someone. Ryan literally froze in place, every muscle in his body tense. The spacious mansion had a relatively large basement where various things were stored. The climate-controlled wine cellar for the imported wines he collected, a small gym equipped with a few machines that Megan occasionally used, and a storage room for various old materials. He rarely, very rarely, went down to that space. Megan was the one who used the gym more frequently for her morning workouts, but that disturbing sound, that unmistakable and agonizing sound, was definitely different from anything normal. It sounded deeply human. It sounded like pure desperation materialized in sound waves. It sounded like a silent cry for help. He ran desperately to the discreet door that gave exclusive access to the basement, located strategically to the left of the open-plan kitchen. When he finally pulled the metal handle hard, he noticed something that paralyzed him completely for several endless seconds. A padlock. A thick, heavy, completely new and shiny padlock that he had definitely never seen before in his entire life, brutally locking the door from the outside, preventing whoever was inside from getting out. "What the hell is this?" he muttered in a low, trembling voice, feeling his legs literally shake under his own weight. Why, in the name of all that is holy, was there an industrial padlock locking the access to the basement of his own house? Who put it there, and for what sinister purpose? And the most terrifying and urgent question of all, was there someone, a living soul, trapped down there at that very moment? Ryan didn't think for more than 2 seconds. He didn't reason. He didn't plan. He just acted on pure, primitive instinct. He ran desperately to the laundry room, violently opened a tall tool cabinet that was kept there, and quickly grabbed a rusty but sturdy crowbar and ran back with his heart pounding erratically in his chest. With all the physical strength he still had in his exhausted body, he jammed the metal tip of the tool between the sturdy padlock and the wooden doorframe and applied brutal pressure. The metal screeched loudly, resisted stubbornly, but finally gave way with a loud, dry snap that echoed through the empty house. The broken padlock fell noisily onto the ceramic floor. He violently opened the heavy door. A steep, grey concrete staircase descended directly into the deepest, most complete darkness. The nauseating smell that immediately rose from the depths was absolutely unbearable and revolting. Pervasive dampness, accumulated mold, and something much more disturbing, something organic, something that made his stomach churn violently and bile rise, burning his throat. "Mom?" he called out, with a completely choked and trembling voice, cautiously descending the first few uneven concrete steps. His voice came out weak, laden with a paralyzing fear he had never experienced. He desperately fumbled along the cold, damp wall until he finally found the old light switch. He turned on the dim, yellowish basement light. What he finally saw there instantly and forever destroyed something fundamental and precious inside him. On the cold concrete floor of the basement, curled in a fetal position on a thin old mattress completely soiled with indescribable stains, was Eleanor, his beloved mother. Her naturally white hair was completely disheveled, tangled, full of accumulated filth. Her once full and healthy face was frighteningly thin, almost skeletal, with prominent cheekbones and pale skin. Her lips were cracked, bleeding at the corners. Her eyes were sunken deep into their sockets. She was wearing an old, stained nightgown that Ryan definitely didn't recognize. Around her fragile wrists, evident red and purple marks clearly indicated that something, probably ropes or restraints, had been tied there very recently, cutting off circulation, bruising the delicate skin. There was an old dirty plastic bucket in the darkest corner of the basement, exuding an absolutely nauseating and inhuman odor. "Mum! Mum, for God's sake!" Ryan ran down the stairs desperately, almost falling on the last few steps, and immediately knelt beside her on the cold, dirty floor. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes, as if every tiny movement required a superhuman effort she could barely muster. When she finally recognized him through the fog of pain and dehydration, thick, silent tears began to roll slowly down her thin, bruised face. "Ryan," she whispered in a hoarse, almost completely inaudible voice, as if her vocal cords had been damaged by disuse or screaming. "You're back. You're finally back. She said so many times you were never coming back, that you'd abandoned me forever." "Who said that? Who did this horrible thing to you?" he asked desperately, holding his mother's cold face with both trembling hands. Her skin was too hot, high fever, severe dehydration. "I'm getting you out of here right now. Now! You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay." He picked her up in his arms, with all the humanly possible gentleness, but felt with deep horror how light she was, frighteningly too light, as if she were made only of fragile bones covered by a thin layer of skin. How many precious pounds had she lost during this nightmare? He climbed the stairs with extreme care, carrying her as if she were a small, fragile child. Eleanor could barely keep her tired eyes open, her head lolled to the side, strengthless. "Hang on, Mom. Please, for the love of God, hang on with me," he pleaded desperately, carefully placing her on the large, soft living room sofa. He grabbed his phone with uncontrollably shaking hands and with difficulty dialed the national emergency number. The professional voice of the operator sounded like a divine salvation. 911, what's your emergency?" "My mother. Please, I urgently need an ambulance right now. She's very, very sick. Dehydrated, feverish, weak. She was kept locked in the basement. Please, please, come as fast as you can." His voice was practically a desperate scream mixed with sobs he could no longer control. While giving the full address in a trembling voice, Ryan ran to the kitchen, quickly grabbed a clean glass of filtered water and ran back. He gently held his mother's heavy head, trying to get her to drink small, careful sips. Eleanor coughed weakly but managed to swallow a little of the life-saving liquid. "Easy, dear Mom. Easy. Help is on the way. You're going to be okay. I swear to God you're going to be okay," he repeated like a desperate mantra of protection, stroking her disheveled hair. Tears streamed freely down Ryan's face without him even noticing or caring. "Son," Eleanor murmured with immense effort, opening her tired eyes again for a few seconds. There was something in that gaze that broke his heart into 1,000 pieces. Indescribable pain, deep fear, betrayal, but also an immense and palpable relief. "I screamed so much. I begged so much, but she wouldn't let anyone hear me. No one." "Who, Mum? Who did this monstrous thing to you? Tell me, please." Before she could gather the strength to answer, they heard loud, urgent sirens in the distance, rapidly approaching down the street. Ryan ran desperately to the front door and threw it open. 2 uniformed paramedics quickly got out of the white ambulance, carrying a foldable stretcher and a large bag of medical equipment. "She's in here, quick please," he shouted, frantically pointing to the living room. The trained paramedics immediately knelt beside Eleanor, checking her vital signs with professional efficiency. One of them quickly placed an oxygen mask on her pale face, while the other checked her blood pressure with a digital device. "Blood pressure is very low, severe dehydration. Vitals are critical. We need to transport her immediately," one of the serious men said, looking directly at Ryan. "Are you her son?" "Yes, I'm her son. I'm going with you. I'm not leaving her alone for a second." "You can come with us. We're taking her directly to Mount Sinai Hospital. It's the closest from here and has a full facility for severe cases like this." Ryan couldn't think straight at that moment. His brain was in pure survival mode. He quickly grabbed his wallet, his phone, and hurried into the ambulance with the paramedics. As the vehicle sped through the still empty New York streets with its siren cutting through the early morning silence, he held his mother's cold hand tightly, feeling how she was too cold despite the fever consuming her. "Please, God, don't take her from me now," he prayed in absolute silence, repeating the words over and over in his confused mind. In the brightly lit emergency room of the hospital, the highly trained medical team received Eleanor with maximum urgency. Nurses quickly administered IV fluids into her fragile veins, connected monitors that beeped constantly, and performed rapid preliminary tests. Ryan was gently but firmly led to a waiting room while the doctors worked efficiently. He sat down, completely exhausted, in an uncomfortable blue plastic chair, his heavy head in his trembling hands. How had this happened? How, for exactly 15 whole days, had his beloved mother been trapped in that inhuman hell while he was literally on the other side of the world, closing million-dollar deals? The guilt tore him apart brutally from the inside, ripping his heart into bloody pieces. Approximately one long, endless hour later, a serious doctor in a pristine white coat approached him. She was a middle-aged woman with brown hair tied tightly in a professional bun, her expression grave but compassionate. "Mr. Ryan Miller." "Yes, that's me. Please tell me she's going to be okay. Please, I'm begging you." The doctor took a deep breath and carefully sat down. Next to him in the adjacent chair, "Your mother is stable at the moment. We're administering IV fluids to rehydrate her system, strong antibiotics to prevent serious infections, and painkillers to manage the pain. But I need to be completely honest and direct with you. Her clinical condition is extremely serious. She presents with severe dehydration, advanced malnutrition, significant body weight loss, recent and extensive bruising on her wrists and ankles, completely consistent with prolonged physical restraint, and clear signs of prolonged confinement in a completely unsanitary and inhuman environment. There are also indications of a possible onset of a lung infection." Ryan closed his eyes tightly. Each medical term was a deep, painful stab. How long? How long was she likely in that horrible place? "Based on the clinical signs we're observing, I would conservatively say between 10 and 15 full days, possibly longer. 15 days. Exactly the same period he had been traveling the world. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Doctor, what she suffered obviously wasn't an accident, right? Someone deliberately did this to her." The doctor looked at him with deep human compassion. "Mr. Miller, the medical evidence clearly points to severe elder abuse, as required. By state law, I am legally obligated to immediately notify the proper authorities. I've already contacted the hospital's social services and the NYPD's Elder Abuse Unit. A detective will be here shortly to speak with you and take your formal statement." Ryan nodded slowly, feeling an explosive mix of uncontrollable rage, deep sadness, and paralyzing shock. "I authorize everything. I want a full investigation. I want them to find and severely punish whoever did this to my mother." "Do you have any idea, any suspicion of who could have committed this horrific act against your mother?" He opened his mouth to answer, but the painful words got stuck in his tight throat. Megan. All the signs, all the evidence, all logic pointed directly to Megan. But how was that possible? How? The woman with whom he had intimately shared a bed for 7 whole years, the woman who solemnly swore to love him before God and 300 witnesses, the woman he trusted completely. How could she have done something so absolutely monstrous and inhuman? "My wife, Megan," he finally said, his voice a painful, choked whisper. "My wife was supposedly taking care of my mother while I was away on business. When I finally got home a few hours ago, the house was completely empty and deserted, and I found my mother locked in the basement with a padlock." The doctor carefully noted the important information on a clipboard. "Are you able to get in direct contact with her at this moment? I've tried calling numerous times. She never answers. She doesn't respond to any messages." "I understand the situation perfectly. The detective in charge will definitely want to speak with you in detail about all of this. For now, your mother is being carefully transferred to an intensive care unit. You will be able to see her soon, but she is sedated to rest properly. Her fragile body urgently needs to recover from the physical and emotional trauma." Ryan thanked her with a slow nod. As the doctor walked away down the hall, he picked up his phone with still trembling hands and desperately tried to call Megan one more time. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then, almost by instinct, he dialed another number he knew by heart. Carla, the housekeeper. After exactly 3 long rings, she finally answered, her voice audibly scared and nervous. "Mr. Miller?" "Carla, where are you right now? What the hell happened at my house? I need answers now." There was an extremely long, heavy pause. He could clearly hear her heavy, irregular breathing on the other end of the line. "Mr. Miller, I've been needing to talk to you for days, but she strictly forbade me. She said in no uncertain terms that if I opened my mouth, she would fire me immediately and personally make sure I could never work anywhere in this city again. I have young children to support on my own, you understand? I was so scared. Who, Carla, who threatened you? Tell me now, for God's sake. Mrs. Megan, Mr. Miller, it was her who locked Mrs. Eleanor down there in that horrible place. Ryan literally felt the floor disappear from under his staggering feet. Even though he already strongly suspected, even though he was practically certain, hearing it confirmed out loud by a witness was like taking a direct shot to the chest, piercing his heart. What do you mean, Carla? Explain everything to me, now, every detail. Don't hide anything. Carla's choked voice trembled visibly as she finally began to tell him everything. And, with every painful word that came out, the absolute horror of the truth revealed itself completely, systematically destroying everything Ryan thought he knew about the woman he had married. The cold dawn was still far from over, and the worst, much worse, was inevitably yet to come. Ryan Miller wasn't just another successful New York businessman. At 42, he had built a real estate empire that started humbly with a small two-room office on Fifth Avenue, sharing space with 3 other aspiring entrepreneurs, and over nearly 20 years, it had become one of the most respected and admired development firms in the country. Residential towers that touched the Manhattan sky, commercial projects that reshaped entire neighborhoods, and luxury condos featured in the most prestigious architecture magazines. His name, Ryan Miller, was engraved on bronze plaques all over the city, from the financial district to the area around Wall Street. Business leaders wanted to partner with him. Investors vied for his deals. The specialized press called him a visionary. But none of that, absolutely none of that material and professional success was more valuable to Ryan than the 2 women who occupied the absolute center of his heart. His mother, Eleanor, and his wife, Megan. They were the ones who gave meaning to everything. They were the ones who turned that mansion on the Upper East Side into a real home, not just a luxurious property listed in his portfolio. Or at least, that's what he believed, with all the sincerity of his heart, until that night that would change everything forever. His private driver was waiting for him in the arrivals area, holding a discreet sign with his name. Ryan gave a brief nod, carrying only a carry-on bag. He was anxious to get home. Throughout the trip, he had exchanged daily messages with Megan, but in the last 3 days, her replies had become increasingly short, almost monosyllabic. "Everything's fine. Your mum's fine. Don't worry." He attributed the distance to her fatigue. After all, taking care of Eleanor was no simple task. His mother was 73, but with a vitality that defied her age. White hair always neatly styled, brown eyes that sparkled with wit, a smile that lit up any room. A widow for 8 years, since Ryan's father passed away from cardiac complications, Eleanor had moved into her son's mansion on the Upper East Side. The decision was natural. Ryan was an only child, and the idea of leaving her alone in an apartment in Brooklyn was unacceptable to him. The relationship between mother and son had always been deep. Eleanor had been a literature teacher for nearly 40 years, and it was she who taught Ryan to read, to value words, to understand that the world was much bigger than the 4 walls of any house. Even after he became a businessman, she remained his greatest advisor. "Son," she would say in her calm, firm way, "money comes and goes, but character remains. Never forget." That, when Ryan married Megan 7 years ago, the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law seemed harmonious. Megan was a beautiful, elegant woman, 10 years younger than Ryan. They met at a charity gala at the Apex Hotel. She worked in public relations for a reputable agency and had a natural charm that drew eyes wherever she went. The courtship was fast, passionate. In less than a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony at an estate in the Hamptons. At first, everything seemed perfect. Megan was attentive to Eleanor, asking about her health, organizing family lunches. But over the years, Ryan began to notice small changes. Subtle comments from Megan about needing more privacy, impatient looks when his mother offered an opinion on a domestic matter, long sighs when Eleanor decided to join them for a social event. "It's normal, son," Eleanor would say when Ryan asked if she was feeling okay in the house. "Every daughter-in-law needs her space. I understand." But there was something in her eyes that Ryan couldn't quite decipher. A veiled sadness, a discomfort she tried to hide behind polite smiles. In recent months, Ryan had noticed his mother was quieter, less engaged. She, who had always filled the house with classical music playing on the living room stereo, who loved to bake brownies for guests, who spent hours reading in the garden, seemed to be retreating more and more to her room. When he asked, she would brush it off. "I'm just tired, son. Age is catching up, you know." But Ryan knew it wasn't just that. The car glided through the empty streets of New York. The fine rain beat against the windshield as the driver headed up the FDR Drive toward the Upper East Side. Ryan looked out the window, watching. The city lights reflect in the puddles. He felt a tightness in his chest, an unease he couldn't explain. He picked up his phone and tried calling Megan again. She didn't answer. He sent a text. "I'm getting home. I love you." No response. It was 4:15 in the morning when the car stopped in front of the iron gates of the mansion. Ryan got out, thanked the driver, and observed the property. The three-story house, with its modern grey and white facade, was completely dark. Not a single light on. No sign of life. Strange. Even when he traveled, Megan always left the porch light on, a tradition she had started herself. "So you know someone's waiting," she would say. Ryan opened the gate with the remote and walked up the cobblestone driveway to the main entrance. His suitcase made a dull thud against the wheels. The garden was impeccable, the plants well cared for, the lawn trimmed, everything in its place, everything as it should be. But the feeling that something was wrong grew with every step. He opened the front door with his key. The silence inside the house was deafening. There was no music, no aroma of coffee that Eleanor always prepared on the nights she couldn't sleep. No voices, no footsteps, no life. The mansion felt like a luxurious mausoleum. "Megan," he called, leaving his suitcase at the entrance. His voice echoed off the empty walls. Nothing. "Mom?" He tried again, climbing a few steps of the staircase that led to the bedrooms. Absolute silence. Ryan turned on the lights in the living room. Everything was perfectly organized. The immaculate beige sofas, the aligned cushions, the coffee table without a single smudge. He walked to the kitchen, clean, gleaming, as if no one had cooked there in days. He opened the refrigerator, full of food but no prepared dishes, no sign of recent meals. His heart began to beat faster. He ran up the stairs to the second floor. The bedroom he shared with Megan was empty, the bed made, the curtains drawn. He opened her closet. Some clothes were missing. He grabbed his phone and called again, straight to voicemail. "Mom!" he shouted, almost desperate now. He ran to Eleanor's room at the end of the hall. The door was closed. He turned the handle, locked from the outside. His blood ran cold. Why on earth? Would his mother's room be locked from the outside? With a sharp movement, he forced the lock with his shoulder. The door gave way. The room was empty. The bed made, the windows closed, everything in order. But his mother wasn't there. Her clothes in the closet, her books on the nightstand, her reading glasses on the bedside table. Everything was there, except her. Ryan went downstairs again, now completely overcome with panic. He searched every room, living room, dining room, office, guest bathroom, laundry room, nothing. He called for Carla, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for 5 years. No answer. The house was deserted. That's when he heard it. A muffled, distant, almost imperceptible sound, coming from below, from the basement. Ryan froze. The mansion had a basement with a wine cellar, a small gym, and a storage room. He rarely went down there. Megan used the gym, but that sound was different. It sounded like a moan or a muffled cry. He ran to the door that led to the basement, located next to the kitchen. When he pulled the handle, he noticed something that paralyzed him completely. A padlock, a thick, new padlock he had never seen before, locking the door from the outside. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his legs trembling. Why was there a padlock on the basement? Who put it there? And most importantly, Was someone down there? Ryan didn't think twice. He ran to the laundry room, grabbed a crowbar from a tool cabinet, and ran back. With all his strength, he jammed the tool between the padlock and the door and applied pressure. The metal groaned, resisted, but finally gave way. The padlock broke with a dry snap. He opened the door. A concrete staircase descended into darkness. The smell that rose up was unbearable. Dampness, mold, something else. Something that made his stomach churn. "Mom!" he called, descending the first few steps. His voice came out trembling, filled with fear. He fumbled along the wall until he found the switch. He turned on the light. What he saw destroyed something inside him. On the basement floor, curled in a fetal position on a thin, dirty mattress, was Eleanor. Her white hair was disheveled, tangled. Her face was thin, her lips cracked, her eyes sunken. She wore a stained nightgown Ryan didn't recognize. Around her, wrists, red and purple marks indicated that something had been tied there recently. There was a plastic bucket in the corner, exuding a nauseating odor. "Mom! Mom! For God's sake!" Ryan ran down the stairs and knelt beside her. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes, as if every movement required a superhuman effort. When she recognized him, tears began to roll down her face. "Ryan," she whispered in a hoarse, almost inaudible voice. "You're back. She said you were never coming back." "Who said that? Who did this to you?" he asked, holding his mother's face with both hands. It was hot. Fever. "I'm getting you out of here now. He picked her up in his arms as gently as possible, but felt how light she was, far too light. How many pounds had she lost? He climbed the stairs, carrying her as if she were a child. Eleanor could barely keep her eyes open. "Hang on, Mom, please hang on," he pleaded, placing her on the living room sofa. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. The operator's voice sounded like a salvation. 911, what's your emergency? My mother. I need an ambulance now. She's very sick, dehydrated, feverish. She was kept locked in the basement. Please come quick. His voice was a desperate scream. While giving the address, Ryan ran to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and returned. He held his mother's head, trying to get her to drink small sips. Eleanor coughed but managed to swallow a little. "Easy, Mum, easy. Help is on the way. You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay," he repeated like a mantra, stroking her hair. Tears streamed down Ryan's face without him noticing. "Son," Eleanor murmured, opening her eyes. Again, there was something in that look, pain, fear, but also a deep relief. "I screamed so much, I begged, but she wouldn't let anyone hear me." "Who, Mom? Who did this?" Before she could answer, they heard sirens in the distance, rapidly approaching. Ryan ran to the door and opened it. 2 paramedics got out of the ambulance carrying a stretcher and a bag of equipment. "She's in here, quick," he shouted, pointing to the living room. The paramedics knelt beside Eleanor, immediately checking her vital signs. One of them placed an oxygen mask on her face while the other checked her blood pressure. "Blood pressure is very low, severe dehydration. We need to take her now," one of the men said, looking at Ryan. "Are you her son?" "Yes, I'm her son. I'm going with you." "You can come. We're taking her to Mount Sinai. It's the closest and has the facilities for severe cases." Ryan couldn't think straight. His brain was in survival mode. He grabbed his wallet, his phone, and got into the ambulance with the paramedics. As the vehicle sped through the empty streets of New York, he held his mother's hand, feeling how cold. It was despite the fever. "Please, God, don't take her from me," he prayed in silence. In the hospital's emergency room, the medical team received Eleanor with urgency. Nurses immediately administered IV fluids, connected monitors, and ran preliminary tests. Ryan was led to a waiting room while the doctors worked. He sat in a blue plastic chair, his head in his hands. How had this happened? How, for 15 days, had his mother been trapped in that hell while he was on the other side of the world closing deals? The guilt tore him apart. About an hour later, a doctor in a white coat approached. She was a middle-aged woman, her hair in a bun, her expression serious. "Mr. Ryan Miller?" "Yes, that's me. How is she? Please, tell me she's going to be okay." The doctor sighed and sat down next to him. Your mother is stable for now. We're giving her IV fluids to rehydrate, antibiotics to prevent infection and painkillers. But I need to be honest with you, her condition is serious. She has severe dehydration, malnutrition, significant weight loss, recent bruising on her wrists and ankles consistent with restraint, and signs of prolonged confinement in an unsanitary environment. Ryan closed his eyes. Every word was a stab. How long? How long was she in that place? Based on the clinical signs, I'd say between 10 and 15 days. Maybe longer. 15 days. The same amount of time he was away. Doctor, what she had isn't an accident, right? Someone did this to her. The doctor looked at him with compassion. Mr. Miller, the evidence points to elder abuse. I'm required by law to notify the proper authorities. I've already contacted the hospital's social services and the NYPD's Elder Abuse Unit. A detective will be here to speak with you shortly. Ryan nodded, feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and shock. I authorize everything. I want them to investigate. I want them to punish whoever did this. Do you have any idea who could have done this to your mother? He opened his mouth to answer, but the words got stuck in his throat. Megan. Everything pointed to Megan. But how? Why? The woman he had shared a bed with for 7 years, the woman who swore to love him. How could she have done something so monstrous? My wife, he finally said, his voice a painful whisper. My wife was taking care of my mother while I was traveling. When I arrived, the house was empty, and I found my mother locked in the basement. The doctor noted the information on a clipboard. Can you get in touch with her? I've tried several times. She doesn't answer, doesn't reply to messages. I understand. The detective will want to talk to you about this. For now, your mother is being transferred to an intensive care unit. You can see her soon, but she's sedated to rest. Her body needs to recover. Ryan thanked her with a nod. When the doctor left, he picked up his phone and tried calling Megan one more time. Nothing. Then he dialed another number. Carla, the housekeeper. After 3 rings, she answered, her voice frightened. Mr. Miller. Carla, where are you? What happened at my house? There was a long pause. He could hear her heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Mr. Miller, I needed to talk to you, but she forbade me. She said if I opened my mouth, she'd fire me and make sure I never worked anywhere again. Who, Carla? Tell me now. Mrs. Megan. Mr. Miller, it was her. She was the one who locked Mrs. Eleanor down there. Ryan felt the floor disappear from under him. Even though he already suspected, hearing it confirmed was like taking a shot to the chest. What do you mean, Carla? Explain everything to me. Now. Carla's voice trembled as she began to tell him, and with every word, the horror of the truth was revealed, destroying everything Ryan thought he knew about the woman he was married to. The night was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. Carla's trembling voice echoed over the phone as Ryan sat in that uncomfortable hospital waiting room chair, his body as tense as a wire about to snap. Around him, the hospital hummed with its relentless rhythm. Nurses hurried past with charts, doctors spoke in low tones about procedures, families waited with anxious expressions. But for Ryan in that suspended moment, nothing existed but Carla's frightened voice finally revealing the truth he had dreaded confirming. Mr. Miller, she began, her voice choked, clearly fighting back tears. I swear I tried to do something. I swear to God and on my children I tried. But she threatened me so much, so coldly that I was paralyzed with fear. Mrs. Megan said if I told you or anyone she would destroy me. She'd make me lose my job, spread lies that I was stealing from the house, and make sure no one in New York would ever hire me again. And you know how hard it is for me, Mr. Miller. I'm a single mother with 3 young kids to raise. My rent is late. I can't lose my job. I just can't. Ryan gripped the phone so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His anger wasn't directed at Carla. She was just another victim in this horrible story. The anger was for Megan, for the woman he had loved, for the woman he had trusted completely. I understand, Carla. I'm not mad at you, but I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Every detail matters now. When did this start? Carla took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts and painful memories. It was the day after you left. The very first day. I came to work in the morning, like I always do at 7, and found Mrs. Megan in the kitchen having coffee. She was different, you know. A strange look in her eye, cold. Then she called me over and said she had new instructions for how things would work while you were away. I thought it was normal at first, just changes to the house routine. What did she say exactly? She said Mrs. Eleanor was going through a delicate time, that she had developed an unstable mental condition and needed to be isolated for a while. She said the doctors had recommended complete rest, with no external stimuli. I was worried and asked if I could see Mrs. Eleanor, offer to help, but she was firm. She said no one was to disturb her mother-in-law, that she would take care of everything personally. Ryan closed his eyes, trying to control the rising nausea. Megan's lies were so elaborate, so coldly calculated. Go on, Carla. What happened next? On the second day, Mr. Miller, I started to get more suspicious. I didn't see Mrs. Eleanor anywhere. Her room was always locked. I asked Mrs. Megan how her mother-in-law's health was, if she needed anything, but she always brushed it off or said everything was under control. Then on the third day, early in the morning, I saw something that terrified me. Carla's voice broke for a moment. Ryan could hear her sniffling, trying to compose herself. I had arrived early that day because I needed to clean the outside area. When I passed through the kitchen, I saw Mrs. Megan coming up from the basement stairs carrying a tray. On the tray was a plate with cold, old-looking food, almost untouched. She saw me and got furious. She yelled, asking what I was doing there at that hour, said I was invading the family's privacy. I apologized, said I had arranged with you to come in early that day, but she wouldn't even listen. That's when she took me to the living room and made it very clear. What did she say? She said, looking straight into my eyes in a terrifying way, that Mrs. Eleanor was in the basement because she'd had a violent episode and needed to be restrained for safety, that it was temporary, that she'd be back to normal soon. But she said if I told anyone, if I breathed a word of it, she would accuse me of being an accomplice. She'd tell the authorities that I had also participated in, caring for her mother-in-law, and was equally responsible. She'd sue me and make sure I went to jail with her. Mr. Miller, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking about my children, who would take care of them if I went to jail. Ryan's tears finally began to fall silently. He understood Carla's desperation, but the pain of knowing his mother had suffered for so long while someone in the house knew was almost unbearable. Did you ever see my mother during those days? Did you speak to her? No, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Megan never allowed it. She locked the basement with that heavy padlock and always kept the key with her, on a little chain around her neck. It was like a trophy for her, you know, a show of total control. I heard sounds sometimes coming from that locked door, faint knocks on the concrete walls, muffled moans that sounded like cries for help. Once, I swear to God, I clearly heard Mrs. Eleanor call my name, begging for water. But I was so afraid of Mrs. Megan that I pretended not to hear anything. I pretended it was the wind, the house settling. God forgive me forever, but I was so scared of what she could do to me and my children. Mrs. Megan would have me leave food outside the basement door exactly 3 times a day, always at the same times. 8 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. Just leave the tray at the top of the stairs and go away immediately. She would go down alone later and take everything inside. I never knew if Mrs. Eleanor was eating that cold food properly, if she had enough clean water, if she was getting the heart medication she always took. Nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about what was happening down there in that horrible place, and it eats me up inside to this day. How long did this go on? The entire 15 days you were away. In the last few days, Mrs. Megan started to relax, to get more confident. She would even leave the house for hours, go to the mall, meet friends. She'd leave Mrs. Eleanor there alone, locked up. One time she was out all afternoon and I was just cleaning the house. The sounds coming from the basement were so faint, so desperate. I cried alone in the laundry room, Mr. Miller. I cried and asked God to forgive me for being such a coward. But I was so scared for my children. Ryan wiped his tears with the back of his hand. Carla, where are you now? At my house in the Bronx. I left last night after Mrs. Megan let me go. She said she didn't need me anymore, that she was going away for a few days. She paid me and told me to leave. I was relieved to get out of that house, but at the same time I was desperate thinking about Mrs. Eleanor. You're going to have to give a statement. The police will want to hear everything you've told me. I know, Mr. Miller, and I'll tell them everything. Now that you've found Mrs. Eleanor, I'm not afraid anymore. I'll tell them everything I saw, everything. Mrs. Megan needs to pay for what she did. Thank you, Carla. As hard as it was, thank you for telling me now. I'll need your number to give to the detective. You can give it to him, Mr. Miller. I'll help. In any way I can. And please tell Mrs. Eleanor I'm so sorry, so very sorry. If I could go back in time, I swear I would have done things differently. Ryan hung up the phone and sat there, processing everything he had just heard. Each revelation was like a layer of horror piled on top of the last. Megan hadn't just held his mother prisoner. She had planned it all coldly. She manipulated, threatened, lied. And she did it all while he was on the other side of the world, trusting her to care for the person he loved most. The hatred Ryan felt in that moment was visceral, something that burned in his veins like liquid fire. But there was also guilt, the devastating guilt of not having seen the signs sooner, of having left his mother alone with that woman, of prioritizing business while horror unfolded in his own home. Mr. Miller? Ryan looked up quickly. A man of about 50, with graying hair, wearing a dark grey suit, stood before him. Beside him, a younger woman with glasses held a folder. Yes, that's me, Ryan replied, standing up. I'm Detective Charles Fisher from the NYPD's Elder Abuse Unit. This is Ms. Renata Campos, a social worker from the hospital. May we have a word? Ryan nodded, and the three of them sat in a more private corner of the waiting room. The detective opened a small recorder and placed it on the coffee table. With your permission, I'm going to record our conversation for the official case file. Are you aware of this? I am. You can record everything. Good. Let's start with the basics. Can you tell me, in as much detail as possible, what happened tonight? Ryan took a deep breath and began to narrate. He spoke of the 15-day trip, of Megan's increasingly cold messages, of arriving home to find it empty. He described the moment of horror finding the padlock on the basement, the descent down the dark stairs, the devastating sight of his mother on the floor. He talked about her condition, the marks on her wrists, the bucket in the corner. His voice broke at times, but he forced himself to continue. The detective listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes in a small notebook. And about your wife, Megan, did you have any prior suspicion that she could do something? Like this? Ryan shook his head. Never. I never imagined she was capable of something so cruel. I noticed that in the last few months the relationship between her and my mother was more tense, some acidic comments here and there, but nothing that indicated this, nothing that even came close to this. Are you able to get in touch with her? I've tried several times. She doesn't answer her phone. Messages go unanswered. The detective exchanged a meaningful look with the social worker. Mr. Miller, we've just received information from the airport. Megan Miller boarded a flight to Miami. Last night around 10 p.m. We are tracking her movements. Ryan felt his blood boil. She ran. She knew I was coming back and would find out, so she ran. We don't know her intentions yet, but we've issued an alert. She won't be able to leave the country. We'll locate her soon. Ms. Campos leaned forward, her expression compassionate. Mr. Miller, I've spoken with the medical team caring for your mother. Her condition is serious but stable. In addition to physical treatment, she will need intensive psychological support. The trauma of being held captive by a family member is profound and leaves scars that go beyond the physical. I'll arrange for everything, the best professionals, anything she needs. There's something else we need to discuss, the detective continued. We'll need to photograph the location where your mother was held. Collect evidence. Can you give us access to the house? Of course, you can go right now if you want. I'll call my lawyer and ask him to meet you there and give you the keys. I'm not leaving here as long as my mother needs me. Understood. We'll also need to speak with your housekeeper, Carla. Do you have her contact information? Ryan provided the number he had just received. The detective wrote it down and put his notebook away. Mr. Miller, I know this is an extremely difficult time, but I have to ask, do you have any idea what your wife's motive might have been for doing this? Ryan was silent for a long moment. That was a question he had been asking himself since the moment he found his mother. Why? What did Megan have to gain by doing that? I really don't know, Detective. I have no idea. My mother never did anything to her. Never disrespected her. Maybe jealousy? Maybe she wanted me all to herself, or maybe it's something I just can't see yet. The detective stood up, handing him a card with his contact information. We'll investigate every angle. If you remember anything, any information that might be relevant, please call me immediately. After the detective and the social worker left, Ryan was alone with his thoughts again. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer, Henry Taylor, an experienced man who had handled his company's legal affairs for over 10 years. Ryan, it's almost 6 in the morning. What happened? Henry, sorry to call at this hour, but it's urgent. Something terrible has happened. Ryan summarized the situation in a few direct sentences. On the other end of the line, he heard a shocked silence before Henry responded. My God, Ryan. This is extremely serious. Where are you now? At Mount Sinai with my mother. Stay there. I'm leaving my house now. I'll come to the hospital and then we'll go to your house together with the forensics team. We need to document absolutely everything. And Ryan, this is going to become a criminal case. You need to be prepared. I know. And I want her to pay for everything she did. She will pay. I'll make sure of it. While waiting for Henry to arrive, Ryan was finally allowed to see his mother. A nurse led him to the ICU, explaining on the way that Eleanor was sedated, but he could stay by her side for a few minutes. When Ryan entered the room and saw his mother lying in that hospital bed, connected to wires and tubes, his heart broke all over again. She looked so fragile, so small. He approached slowly, took her hand gently, and sat in the chair beside the bed. Hi, Mom, he whispered, his voice choked. I'm here. You're safe now. I promise no one will ever hurt you again. Never again. Eleanor couldn't hear him, lost in the sedation necessary for her body to rest, but Ryan continued to speak softly, as if the words could reach her on some deep level of consciousness. Forgive me for not protecting you. Forgive me for trusting the wrong person. I should have seen the signs. I should have realized something was wrong. But I swear, Mom, I swear on my life that I will get justice. She will pay for every second of suffering she caused you. A nurse gently touched his shoulder. Mr. Miller, you need to rest too. Your lawyer has arrived and is in the reception area. Your mother will be fine here. We're taking care of her. Ryan nodded, kissed his mother's forehead, and left the room with a heavy heart. Henry was waiting for him in reception, dressed in an impeccable suit, even at that absurd hour. He was a tall man with glasses, with a presence that conveyed competence and seriousness. Ryan, he said, shaking his friend's hand, firmly. We're going to handle this. First, we'll go to your house with the forensics team. Then we need to immediately start legal proceedings against Megan. On the way to the mansion on the Upper East Side, Ryan told Henry all the details Carla had revealed. The lawyer listened in silence, his face growing progressively more serious. This isn't just abuse, Ryan. It's false imprisonment, psychological torture, criminal negligence. We're talking about serious felonies that can result in years in prison, and if we can prove premeditation, the sentence could be even longer. When they arrived at the mansion, team from the crime lab was already waiting. 3 forensic experts, all in uniform with equipment cases. Detective Charles Fisher was there too. Mr. Miller, the detective greeted him, we're going to do a complete survey of the scene. Can you show us exactly where you found your mother? Ryan led them through the modern house, past the large living room that now seemed haunted by invisible ghosts, carefully down the narrow concrete staircase that led to the cursed basement. The dim yellow light was still on from the early morning, illuminating the nightmarish scene almost fantastically, like something straight out of a horror movie. The thin, dirty mattress abandoned on the cold concrete floor, the filthy plastic bucket in the darkest corner exuding a nauseating smell that made the experts cover their noses with handkerchiefs. The clear marks on the rough cement walls where Eleanor's fragile, desperate hands had repeatedly scratched the rough concrete in absolute desperation, leaving traces of broken nails and small dark stains that could be dried blood. The vertical scratches were clearly visible, as if she had tried to climb the walls in a moment of extreme panic. In another corner, there were piles of old cardboard boxes that likely served to hide the ropes and other instruments used to restrain her. The experienced experts immediately began their meticulous and technical work. They methodically photographed every visible centimeter of the place with high-resolution professional cameras, capturing different angles and distances. They carefully collected samples of anything that could serve as evidence in a potential trial: fabric fibers stuck to the walls, stains on the floor that would need to be analyzed in a lab, organic remains. They precisely measured the claustrophobic dimensions of the space to officially document the size of the makeshift prison. One of them, wearing blue latex gloves, carefully examined the broken padlock that still lay abandoned on the ceramic floor near the door, turning it over in his hands to observe tool marks and wear. "I'll need you to show me exactly where you found this padlock," said the oldest expert. Ryan showed them the basement door, explaining how the padlock was positioned, locking it from the outside, preventing any escape. "Are there security cameras in the house?" the detective asked. "Yes, in several external locations. The entrance, garage, garden, but no cameras inside. I always thought we didn't need them, that it was an invasion of privacy. Still, the external cameras might show movements in and out. We'll need to access the recordings from the last 15 days. Of course. The system is in my office. I'll show you." Ryan took them to the office on the first floor. The digital security system was installed in a discreet cabinet. Henry, who was tech-savvy, helped access the files. "Here," said the lawyer, pointing to the screen. "Look at this, Ryan." On the recordings, Megan could be seen leaving the house several times during the 15 days, going to the mall, returning, with shopping bags from expensive stores, hosting friends for lunch in the outdoor area, laughing, talking as if nothing was happening, as if there wasn't an elderly woman locked in the basement, suffering. "She was living a normal life," Ryan murmured with disgust. "She was shopping, having visitors while my mother was downstairs starving and thirsty." The detective was taking notes. "This footage is gold for the case. It clearly shows she wasn't under any pressure or threat. She was acting freely, maintaining a normal social life while committing the crime." One of the experts came up from the basement. "Detective, we found something. Ropes with bloodstains behind some boxes. They were probably used to tie up the victim. We also found remnants of old food, dirty water in bottles. Everything points to systematic deprivation." Ryan had to leave the office. He went out to the front porch, breathing in the cold morning air that was beginning to lighten. New York was slowly waking up. Cars passed on the street. Birds sang in the trees. Life was going on as normal for everyone but him. Henry came out to where he was standing. "Ryan, I know this is hard, but we need to think about the next steps. Besides the criminal case, you need to think about the divorce and protecting your assets. Megan might try to claim she's entitled to half of everything. She's not getting a cent from me, not if I have to fight this to the end. We'll take care of everything, but first, let's make sure she's arrested, then we'll deal with the rest." Hours later, when Ryan finally returned to the hospital, navigating the chaotic New York traffic that was already starting to build up, even on a Friday morning, physically and emotionally exhausted, with deep dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven face that gave him a disheveled look he never had, there was an urgent message waiting for him at the hospital reception. The attendant, a young woman in a light blue uniform, called him over as soon as he passed the desk. "Mr. Miller, there's an urgent message for you. A woman called about an hour ago, said she was your wife. She left a specific contact number and insisted that you call her back as soon as possible. She said it was extremely important." Ryan froze for a moment, processing the unexpected information. Megan had called. She had the nerve to call after everything. He took the piece of paper with the number on it with slightly trembling fingers and stood there, staring at the digits on his phone screen as if they were the most dangerous thing in the world. Part of him, the part driven by pure visceral rage, wanted to call immediately and scream at the top of his lungs, to unleash all the accumulated fury and deep hatred burning in his chest. He wanted to curse her, to damn her, to make her feel at least a fraction of the pain she had caused. But the rational part, the the part that still functioned despite the emotional chaos, knew he needed to be strategic and cautious. Every word, every action from now on could impact the legal process that was just beginning. He called the detective first. "She contacted me. She left a number. Don't call yet. I'm coming over with equipment to record the conversation. Everything she says can be used against her. Give me 20 minutes. When the detective arrived with a technician, they quickly set up a recording system on Ryan's phone. Then, with the recorder on and the detective by his side making signals, Ryan finally called the number Megan had left. She answered on the second ring. "Ryan, thank God you called." Her voice was soft, almost tearful. The same voice he knew, the same voice that once made him fall in love. "Where are you, Megan?" he asked, making a superhuman effort to keep his voice controlled. "In Miami. I needed to get out of New York for a few days to breathe. The situation at home was so heavy." "Heavy? You think it was heavy? I know you. I must be worried about your mother, but let me explain everything. She wasn't well, Ryan. She had an episode. Started saying things that didn't make sense, behaving dangerously. I had to isolate her for her own safety." Ryan closed his eyes, his anger simmering. "Isolate her? You locked my mother in the basement with a padlock, Megan. You left her without water, without proper food, without care. I found her nearly dead." There was a pause on the other end. When Megan spoke again, her voice had changed, less sweet, more defensive. "I took care of her. I gave her food, water. I did what I could. She was aggressive, Ryan. I was afraid of her. You weren't here. You didn't see what she was like." "Lies. All lies. Carla told me the truth. The police are investigating. You're going to be arrested, Megan. For false imprisonment, for abuse, for everything." Another pause. When she spoke again, there was anger in her voice too. "Carla? That incompetent maid. She's an accomplice in all this. She knew everything and did nothing. If I'm going to jail, so is she. She was afraid of you. You threatened her and her children, but now she's going to testify against you. And so are the cameras. I have recordings of you going out shopping, hosting friends, while my mother was suffering downstairs." The silence on the other end was heavy. When Megan finally spoke again, her voice was cold, calculating. "Ryan, listen to me. Come back to me. We can sort this out together. I'll say it was all a misunderstanding, that your mother really was sick and I was trying to help. With good lawyers, we can make this disappear. But help me, don't turn me over to the police. Are you insane? You think I would go back to you after what you did to my mother? Think about it, Ryan. Think about everything we built together. 7 years of marriage. Don't throw it all away for an old woman who's already lived her life." Ryan hung up the phone. He couldn't listen to that voice anymore. The detective turned off the recorder, a satisfied smile on his face. "Perfect. She completely incriminated herself. I'm sending this to the judge now. The arrest warrant will be issued in a few hours." Ryan went back to the room where his mother was resting. He sat beside the bed and finally allowed all his pent-up emotions to come out. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. He cried for his mother, for her suffering, for Megan's betrayal, for the guilt he carried. But he also made silent promises. Promises to never leave his mother unprotected again, to get justice, to rebuild their lives, stronger than before. The morning was bright now. A new day was beginning. And with it, a new battle. A battle that Ryan was determined to win, no matter the cost. The news of Megan Miller's arrest reached Ryan through a call from Detective Charles Fisher 3 days after that life-altering dawn. It was 7 in the morning on a cloudy Monday when the phone rang, jolting Ryan from a light, restless sleep in the uncomfortable armchair beside his mother's hospital bed. He had barely left that room since he arrived. He ate there, slept there, lived there. The only thing that mattered was being present when Eleanor finally woke up from the sedation. "Mr. Miller, we got her. Megan was arrested about an hour ago in Miami. She was staying at a 5-star hotel in South Beach, registered under a false name. She tried to resist arrest, caused a scene in the hotel lobby, but she's in custody now and being transported back to New York." Ryan closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and bitter satisfaction. Finally, she would pay for what she did. "Thank you for letting me know, Detective." When will she arrive here? She should be here around noon. She'll be taken directly to the precinct where she'll be held pending her arraignment. But Mr. Miller, there's something else I need to tell you. We've uncovered some serious things during the investigation. Very serious. Can you come down to the precinct this afternoon? We need to talk in person. Of course. I'll be there as soon as I can. After hanging up, Ryan looked at his mother. Over the past 3 days, she had improved considerably. The doctors had gradually reduced the sedation, allowing her to wake up for short periods. She was still weak, still needed IV fluids and medication, but her vital signs were stabilizing. Her body was fighting bravely to recover from the physical trauma it had endured. The previous morning, Sunday, Eleanor had woken up for the first time more consciously and lucidly. When she opened her brown eyes and recognized Ryan sitting by her bed, tears immediately began to roll down her face, still marked by suffering. "Son," she had whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. "You're here. You're really here." "I am, Mom, and I'm never leaving your side again. You're safe. You're in the hospital, being cared for. It's all over. She told me so many times that you had abandoned me, that you had left and would never come back, that I was a burden and you were happy to be away from me. I tried not to believe it, but after days and days of hearing the same thing, I started to doubt everything." Ryan held her hand gently, feeling her fingers tremble. "None of that is true, Mum. None of it. I would never abandon you. Never. You are the most important person in my life. You always have been and always will be." The doctor in charge of her case, Dr. Paula Mendez, a competent woman in her 40s, had explained to Ryan that Eleanor's psychological trauma might be harder to heal than the physical. "Mr. Miller, she was the victim of a very cruel type of psychological torture. The forced isolation, the deprivation of basic needs, the constant lies about you abandoning her, all of that leaves deep scars on anyone's psyche, especially someone of an advanced age. She will need intensive psychiatric care and therapy for a long time. It's possible she has developed a post-traumatic stress disorder that will need to be treated with great care and patience." Ryan had agreed to everything, willing to provide the best professionals, the best treatments, whatever was necessary, to help his mother fully recover. That Monday morning, around 9 o'clock, the social worker, Ms. Renata Campos, entered the room accompanied by a trauma psychologist. It was time to try to get a formal statement from Eleanor about what had happened during those 15 days of horror. "Eleanor," the psychologist began in a soft, gentle voice sitting beside the bed. "My name is Juliana. I'm a psychologist and I'm here to help you. I know it's difficult, but it would be very important for the investigation if you could tell us what happened. You can take your time, there's no rush. If you want to stop at any point, just say, so." Eleanor looked at Ryan, who gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath, gathering her strength, and began to speak. Her voice was low, trembling, but determined. "It started the day after my son left for that important business trip to Dubai. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I remember it well because I looked out my bedroom window and saw the garden in full bloom. I was having a quiet breakfast in the kitchen, eating that warm, crusty bread I've always liked, when Megan came in. Her demeanor was different from the moment she woke up that day. She had a strange, cold, calculating look in her eyes, a look I had never seen before in all our years together. It was as if a mask had fallen off and I was seeing the real person behind the polite, kind facade she always maintained for the first time. She said we needed to have an urgent and important talk. She led me firmly to the living room and practically pushed me onto the sofa. That's when she finally said, with a coldness that chilled my blood, that I was deeply disrupting her life, that my constant presence in that house was an unbearable weight she could no longer carry, that she had married Ryan to have a life as a couple, not to be an old woman's babysitter. I was absolutely shocked, paralyzed. I tried to reason with her, explained that I had always tried my best to respect their space as a couple, that I never wanted to be a nuisance or an intruder. I said that if she thought it was for the best, I could go back to living alone in my apartment in Brooklyn, but she wouldn't even listen to what I had to say. She said I didn't understand, that the problem wasn't where I lived, but my very existence getting in the way of her plans. Eleanor paused, her voice failing, her tear-filled eyes shining with restrained tears. That's when she grabbed my arm with a brutal force that left a purple bruise later, literally dragging me through the house to that staircase that goes down to the basement. I tried to resist with all my might. I screamed, I begged, but she was much younger and stronger than me. When we got down to that dark, damp place, she pushed me so violently that I fell backward onto the hard concrete floor. I felt a sharp pain in my back that lasted for days. She stood there looking down at me from the top of the stairs, as if I were a disgusting insect, and said in an icy voice that made my skin crawl, "You're going to stay down here until you learn your place, until you finally understand that this house is mine, and you are not welcome in it." I begged on my knees. I cried desperately. I pleaded pleas for the love of God to let me go, for us to talk, for her not to do this. But she just laughed. A cold, sadistic, terrible laugh that I will never be able to forget as long as I live. Then she went up the stairs and locked the heavy door. I clearly heard the definitive metallic sound of the padlock being closed, sealing my fate in that hell. And then just absolute silence. A heavy, desperate silence that felt like it had physical weight. Ryan squeezed his mother's hand, his own tears streaming down his face. For the first few days, I still had hope. I thought it was temporary, that she would change her mind. I screamed a lot. I banged on the walls, on the door, calling for help. I would hear movements upstairs sometimes. Voices. Music. Life going on as normal while I was down there, slowly dying. Megan would come down once or twice a day. She'd bring cold food, water in dirty bottles. She'd throw it on the floor and leave without a word. Sometimes she would just stand there watching me, saying horrible things. "What kind of things?" the psychologist asked gently. She said I was old, useless, that I was good for nothing, that Ryan had taken the trip specifically to get away from me, that he was tired of supporting me. She said that when he came back, he would agree to put me in a nursing home, and that I would never see my son again. I tried not to believe it, but as time went on and Ryan didn't show up, I started to think that maybe it was true. The psychologist took careful notes. "Were you physically assaulted besides being pushed on the first day?" "Yes. Once I tried to run up the stairs when she opened the door to bring food. I managed to get halfway up, but she caught me and threw me back down. I landed on my back on the concrete floor. I was in terrible pain for days. Another time she tied me up with ropes when I said I would scream until someone heard me. The ropes hurt my wrists. She would tighten them more whenever I tried to get free." Ryan couldn't listen anymore without feeling a piercing pain in his chest. Every detail was torture. His mother, that woman who had always been kind and loving, being treated in such an inhuman way. "And about the documents," the social worker continued, "do you remember Megan trying to make you sign anything?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes. It was on the 8th or 9th day, I'm not sure. She came down with papers and a pen. She said I needed to sign them. I asked what they were. She replied that they were documents about my mental health, that I was being diagnosed with dementia and needed a legal guardian. I refused flatly. I said I wouldn't sign anything. She became furious. She got a glass with something mixed in it, forced me to drink it. I felt dizzy, sleepy. I don't know if I managed to sign anything or not. Everything became a blur after that." The psychologist and the social worker exchanged significant looks. "That is very important, Eleanor. We will investigate whether there are any documents signed by you during that period. If they exist and are proven to have been obtained under duress or while you were under the influence of substances, they will be considered null and void." After the statement, which lasted nearly 2 hours with several breaks for Eleanor to rest and drink water, Ryan walked the professionals to the hallway. "How is she really?" he asked. "Physically, she's improving well," replied Juliana, the psychologist. "Psychologically, it's a long road. She is showing symptoms of post-traumatic stress, as we expected. Nightmares, heightened anxiety, fear of being alone. But with proper treatment and a lot of family support, which she clearly has, recovery is possible. You are doing a wonderful job by constantly being by her side." Around 2 in the afternoon, Ryan left the hospital for the first time in days and went straight to the precinct. Henry, his lawyer, met him at the door and they went in together. Detective Charles Fisher received them in his office, his expression grave. On his desk were thick folders filled with documents. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Taylor, please have a seat. What we've discovered goes beyond what we initially imagined." The detective opened one of the folders and began to show them documents. "During the thorough and detailed search of your house, which lasted almost 2 full days, our investigators found, carefully hidden in Megan's private office, inside a locked drawer she always kept the key to, several extremely compromising and revealing papers. First, and perhaps most shockingly, there is a formal and well-structured conservatorship process that she initiated exactly 3 months ago against your mother without anyone's knowledge. In the process, she alleged advanced and progressive senile dementia, total mental incapacity to manage her own life, risk of wandering the streets, and aggressive and erratic behavior. To substantiate these absurd and false claims, she used completely fake medical reports signed by a professional she was secretly paying. We also found, and this is extremely serious, preliminary documents for a possible involuntary commitment of your mother to a private psychiatric clinic upstate, a place we've verified has a terrible reputation and numerous prior complaints of abuse. Everything was architected in minute detail." The detective paused strategically to let the information sink in, observing Ryan's reaction, who was visibly pale with his hands trembling on his knees. "But there's more, Mr. Miller, much more. We also found records of attempted bank transfers, powers of attorney that your mother never signed, but which contained a reasonably well-done forgery of her signature, and property deeds for your real estate, with handwritten notes from Megan about market values and potential interested buyers. There was even, and this shocked us, a draft of a new will where you would leave half of all your assets to her in the event of your death, something she clearly intended to try to get you to sign at some point of emotional vulnerability or carelessness." Ryan picked up one of the documents. It was a court petition signed by a lawyer he didn't know, requesting the conservatorship of Eleanor Miller for reasons of mental health. "She never told me anything about this," Ryan murmured, incredulous. "Because the real goal wasn't to take care of your mother," the detective explained. "It was to take control of the family's assets. Look here." He showed them other documents, powers of attorney, bank transfers, even an attempt to change a will. Megan was systematically trying to take control of the assets. With your mother under a conservatorship, and you traveling frequently, she would have a free pass to do whatever she wanted. Transfer properties to her name, access bank accounts, sell real estate. She had been planning this for months. Henry examined the documents with the experienced eyes of a lawyer. "This is document fraud, attempted grand larceny, in addition to all the other crimes. Ryan, she wasn't just abusing your mother. She was executing an elaborate plan to steal your entire fortune." Ryan felt as if the floor was disappearing from under his feet again. Each revelation was worse than the last. "There's more," the detective continued. "We found the doctor who signed the fake reports, Dr. Roger Stevens, a psychiatrist who was seeing Megan. Under interrogation, he confessed that he received payments from her to falsely attest to your mother's dementia. Despite never having examined Eleanor personally, he will also be prosecuted for professional misconduct and fraud." "How much did she pay?" "Him?" Ryan asked, his voice hoarse with rage. $50,000 divided into 5 installments. We found the transfer receipts in his bank account. Megan was meticulous in documenting everything, probably to have leverage over him if needed. Henry leaned forward. "Detective, with this additional evidence, we can significantly escalate the charges. We're talking not just about false imprisonment and abuse, but also fraud, forgery, bribery, and attempted embezzlement. She could face decades in prison." "Exactly, and there's one more thing." The detective picked up a flash drive. "On the security cameras you provided, our technical team found something you hadn't seen yet. I'll show you." He plugged the flash drive into his computer and opened a video file. It was from the external camera that filmed the side entrance of the house. The date showed it was a week before Ryan returned from his trip. On the screen, Megan appeared talking on the phone, walking through the garden. The audio was clear. "No, she's not going to last much longer," Megan was saying into the phone, her voice as casual as if she were talking about the weather. "Another week and the problem will solve itself. I just need to make sure that when Ryan gets back she's already, gone. Then it'll be easy to say it was sudden, that she was sick. With Roger's reports, no one will question it, and I'll be free of that annoying old woman once and for all." Ryan felt nausea rise in his throat. She was planning to let his mother die down there. It wasn't just about keeping her locked up. It was a slow, deliberate death sentence. "She wanted my mother to die," he whispered, his hands shaking. "That was the plan all along. All signs point to—" "Yes," the detective confirmed. "She calculated that if your mother didn't survive that period, she could claim it was natural, present the fake dementia reports, and avoid suspicion. With you out of the country and Carla intimidated, there would be no witnesses. It would have been the perfect crime." Henry slammed his fist on the table. "This changes everything. It's not just abuse. It's attempted murder. At the very least, depraved indifference, possibly even intentional. She knew the conditions could kill Eleanor, and she accepted that outcome." Ryan couldn't process it all. The woman he had married, with whom he had shared 7 years of his life, was not who he thought she was. She was a cold, calculating criminal who had methodically planned his mother's murder for money. "Where is she now?" Ryan asked. "In a holding cell at the precinct. She'll stay there until her arraignment tomorrow morning. The judge will decide whether to keep her in custody or grant bail with conditions. But with all this evidence, it's almost certain she'll be held. I want to be there tomorrow. I want to see her answer for all of this." "You can be. The hearing is public, 10 a.m. at the criminal courthouse." When Ryan left the precinct, the afternoon was already turning to dusk. New York was entering rush hour, the traffic starting to back up. He got into his car and sat there for long minutes, trying to process everything he had discovered. He picked up his phone and saw he had several missed calls, all from unknown numbers. There were also WhatsApp messages from friends and colleagues. "Ryan, I saw the news." "My God, is what they're saying true? If you need anything, we're here." "News? What news?" He quickly opened his phone's browser and searched his name. What he saw shocked him. The story had leaked to the press. Blaring headlines filled the major news portals. "Businessman finds elderly mother locked in basement of Upper East Side mansion. Millionaire's wife arrested, accused of holding mother-in-law captive. Case shocks New York 73-year-old woman held prisoner by daughter-in-law." Ryan clicked on one of the articles. The report detailed the basics of the case, obviously based on leaks from the police investigation. There were photos of his house's facade, old photos of him and Megan at social events, even a photo of his mother they had managed to find somewhere. The comments on the articles were in the thousands. People were shocked, outraged, demanding justice. Some speculated about the motives, others shared similar stories of elder abuse. The story had gone viral in a matter of hours. Ryan closed the browser, feeling invaded. His personal tragedy was now public entertainment, but at the same time, a part of him was satisfied. Let everyone know. Let everyone see who Megan really was beneath that mask of elegance and charm. He returned to the hospital and found his mother awake, watching television in her room. When he entered, she quickly turned it off. "Have you seen the news?" she asked in a weak voice. "I have." "Don't worry about it, Mum. The important thing is for you to recover." "I'm not worried," Eleanor said with surprising determination in her eyes. "I'm relieved. Let everyone know what she did. Let other families be on alert. How many other elderly people suffer in silence because they're afraid or ashamed to report it? If my story helps even one person, then all the suffering was worth it." Ryan approached and gently hugged his mother. "You are the strongest woman I know. I learned from your father. He always said that adversity either breaks us or makes us stronger, and I chose to be made stronger." The next morning, Tuesday, Ryan arrived at the criminal courthouse with Henry an hour before the arraignment. The place was already surrounded by journalists and television cameras. When they recognized him, they started shouting questions. "Mr. Miller, how is your mother?" Did you suspect anything? Do you plan to sue your wife for emotional distress? Are you filing for divorce? Ryan didn't answer, just made his way through the crowd into the building. Henry guided him to the courtroom on the second floor. The room was packed. There were other lawyers waiting for different hearings, court staff, and curious onlookers who had managed to get in. Ryan sat in the public seating and waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, the judge entered. She was a middle-aged woman with her hair pulled back, her expression serious. Judge Marcia Rodriguez. The nameplate on the bench read, "Arraignment in case number so-and-so regarding the arrest of Megan Santos Miller. Bring in the defendant." A side door opened. Megan entered in handcuffs, escorted by 2 police officers. Ryan felt his stomach churn at the sight of her. She no longer had that impeccable appearance she always maintained. Her hair was disheveled, she wore no makeup, and was dressed in an orange jumpsuit. When her eyes met Ryan's in the audience, she tried to smile, but he looked away. "The defendant may state her name for the record," the judge ordered. "Megan Santos Miller, 35, entrepreneur," she answered, in a surprisingly firm voice. "Are you represented by counsel?" A man in a suit stood up. "Yes, Your Honor, Fabio Morris representing the defense." The judge picked up the case file and began to read the police report. Her face grew progressively more serious as she read. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Mr. District Attorney, what is the people's position?" The prosecutor, a young man with glasses, stood up. "Your Honor, the people request that the defendant be remanded without bail. The crimes are extremely serious: false imprisonment, elder abuse, attempted murder, document fraud. The defendant is a flight risk and a danger to the community. She has already attempted to flee once by going to Miami. Furthermore, there is a need to ensure the integrity of the investigation, as she may attempt to intimidate witnesses." The defense attorney asked to be heard. "Your Honor, my client alleges that this is all a big misunderstanding. Her mother-in-law was indeed suffering from mental health issues, and she was only trying to restrain her to prevent her from harming herself. There was no intent to cause harm. As for the trip to Miami, it was merely to relieve the stress of the situation. My client has no prior record, has a fixed residence, and an established career. There are no grounds to hold her without bail. We request that she be released on her own recognizance with appropriate conditions." The judge looked directly at Megan. "Do you have anything to say?" Megan cleared her throat. "Yes, Your Honor, I love my husband, and I never meant any harm to my mother-in-law. She was sick, confused. I did what I thought was best at the time. I admit I made mistakes, that perhaps I should have sought professional help, but I never intended to hurt her. I ask that you grant me the chance to answer these charges while free. I have a life, a job, I will not flee." Ryan felt rage boiling inside. Him. She was lying through her teeth. The judge, however, did not seem convinced. "I have reviewed all the elements of this case. The evidence is substantial and indicates serious crimes committed with intent. There are recordings where the defendant herself admits to keeping the victim in inhuman conditions. There is evidence of document fraud. There is a systematic plan to appropriate assets. The version presented by the defense is not supported by the facts. Therefore, convinced of the material evidence and the indications of guilt, as well as the presence of the requirements for remand, I am ordering the defendant held without bail. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. This hearing is adjourned." Megan tried to protest, but the officers were already leading her out. On her way out, she looked at Ryan and shouted, "Ryan, Ryan, please, don't do this to me, we can talk, please." He didn't respond. He just turned his back and left the courtroom with Henry. Outside the courthouse, the journalists surrounded them again. This time, Henry spoke for Ryan. "My client is satisfied with the court's decision. Justice is being served. We ask for the family's privacy during this difficult time. Thank you very much." They quickly moved away, getting into the car that was waiting for them. "She'll be in jail until the trial," Henry said. "That could take months, maybe even over a year, depending on the court's calendar, but at least she's not out on the streets." Ryan nodded, feeling a small sense of relief for the first time in days. It wasn't complete justice yet, but it was a start, an important first step. When he returned to the hospital and told his mother the news, Eleanor cried. But this time they were tears of relief. "It's over, son. The nightmare is finally over. It's not completely over yet, Mom, but we're getting there. And I swear I'll be with you every step of this journey until the very end. You will never be alone again, never again." Mother and son held each other, two survivors of a storm that had nearly destroyed them, but who were now, slowly, beginning to see a ray of light at the end of the dark tunnel. The legal battle was just beginning, but Ryan was prepared to fight for as long as it took. For justice, for his mother, and for all the silent victims who suffered in the shadows without a voice to scream. 8 months had passed since that dawn that forever changed Ryan Miller's life. 8 months of slow, careful rebuilding. 8 months of therapy, treatments, legal proceedings, and above all, of reconnection between mother and son. 8 months that felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. It was a rainy Tuesday in July when the day of Megan Santos Miller's trial finally arrived. The grey sky over New York seemed to reflect the gravity of the moment. Ryan woke up early that morning in the new house he had bought in Greenwich Village, a cozy, single-story home, very different from the Upper East Side mansion he had sold without a second glance. He could no longer set foot in that place without feeling the suffocating weight of horrible memories. The new house was smaller, simpler, but infinitely more full of life and true love. Eleanor was already awake when he came down to the kitchen. She was making coffee, wearing an elegant navy blue suit they had bought together the week before specifically for this day. Her white hair was carefully styled, in a discreet bun. The past few months had done wonders for her recovery. She had regained a healthy amount of weight, the physical marks of her captivity had almost completely vanished, and although she still attended therapy twice a week with her psychologist, Juliana, she was visibly stronger, more present, more herself. "Good morning, son," she said with a smile that warmed Ryan's heart. "Did you get any sleep last night?" "Not much," he admitted, pouring himself a coffee. "I kept thinking about today, about everything that's going to happen." "I barely slept either," Eleanor confessed, sitting at the table beside him. "But you know, son, it's not fear that I feel. It's a strange sense of closure that we're finally going to turn this difficult page and truly start a new chapter." Ryan held his mother's hand affectionately. "Are you sure you want to go? You don't have to be there if it's too hard. The prosecutor said your recorded testimony is already in the record, that it's not mandatory." "I want to be there," Eleanor replied firmly. "I need to look her in the eyes one more time. I need to see her answer for what she did. Not for revenge, you understand, but for justice. And also, perhaps selfishly, I need this for my own healing process. My therapist agreed it could be important for my emotional closure." At 8:30 in the morning, Henry arrived to pick them up. The lawyer had become not just an indispensable professional, but a true friend throughout this painful process. He was always available, always attentive, always fighting tirelessly for the interests of Ryan and Eleanor. "Good morning to you both. Ready?" he asked, noticing the palpable tension in the air. "As ready as we can be," Ryan replied. On the way to the criminal courthouse, Henry briefed them on what to expect from the trial. The jury was selected last week, 7 ordinary people who will hear all the evidence and decide on the defendant's guilt or innocence. The prosecutor, DA Marcus Andrade, is excellent. He's prepared a solid case. Megan's defense will try to discredit the evidence, claim she was under emotional stress, that she had no real intent to cause harm. But honestly, with all the evidence we have, it would be a huge surprise if she were acquitted. "And if she is?" Eleanor asked, a shadow of concern crossing her face. "She won't be," Henry assured her with conviction. "The evidence is irrefutable. The recordings, the documents, the physical state you were found in, Carla's testimony, everything. It's practically an open and shut case." When they arrived at the courthouse, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Dozens of journalists, television cameras from all the major networks, and curious onlookers trying to get in. The case had become nationally famous in recent months. Television shows had debated the topic of elder abuse. Special reports had been produced. Eleanor had given a moving interview to a major network program, where she told her story with admirable courage. helping to raise awareness about a silent crime happening in thousands of American homes. The impact was immense and transformative. Reports of similar cases increased across the country. A stricter law on elder protection was being debated in Congress, informally dubbed Eleanor's Law by the press. Something good was being born from this personal tragedy. Courthouse security cleared a path for Ryan, Eleanor, and Henry to enter. The courtroom was packed to the last available seat. All the public benches were occupied. Ryan recognized a few faces. Carla was there, accompanied by a social worker. Some of his colleagues who had come to show support. Dr. Paula Mendez, the doctor who had cared for his mother at the hospital. Even a few neighbors from the old mansion who had witnessed strange activities during those fateful 15 days. They sat in the seats reserved for them in the front row. Ryan could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at his mother beside him. She was pale but composed, her posture erect, her gaze fixed firmly ahead. At exactly 9 o'clock, a side door opened. Megan entered, accompanied by 2 police officers and her lawyer, Mr. Fabio Morris. Ryan saw her and felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anger, hurt, disappointment, but also a strange pity. She no longer had that impeccable appearance she had always cultivated. The time in jail had taken its toll. She was visibly thinner, her hair cut short and unstyled, with no makeup. She wore a simple grey suit that her defense had likely provided to give a more respectable appearance to the jury. When Megan sat in the defendant's chair and her gaze swept the room, it met Ryan's. For a brief moment, something crossed her face. Regret, sadness, desperation? He couldn't decipher it. Then she quickly looked away. "All rise for the honorable judge," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood. Judge Marcia Rodriguez entered, the same judge from the arraignment months ago. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the packed room. "Good morning, everyone. We are here for the trial in the case of the People versus Megan Santos Miller, who is charged with aggravated kidnapping, elder abuse, attempted murder, forgery, grand larceny, and bribery. You may be seated." The judge gave a brief explanation of how the trial would proceed. First, the prosecution would present its case, then the defense. Witnesses would be heard. Finally, the jury would retire to deliberate and return with a verdict. The prosecutor, D.A. Marcus Andrade, stood up. He was an experienced man in his 50s, with an imposing presence and a reputation for being extremely competent in cases of domestic violence and crimes against vulnerable people. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began in a clear, firm voice that echoed through the silent courtroom, "the case you are about to hear is not just about broken laws or committed crimes. It is about the breach of the most basic and fundamental trust that should exist within a family. It is about the absolute betrayal of that trust in a calculated, cold, and cruel manner. Over the next few days, I will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Megan Santos Miller held her mother-in-law, Eleanor Miller, a 73-year-old woman, prisoner in the basement of her own home for 15 consecutive days. Imprisoned in inhuman conditions, deprived of adequate food, clean water, essential medical care, and basic human dignity. And not only that, I will prove that she did this as part of a broader, more sinister plan to seize control of the family's multi-million-dollar estate through fraud and forged documents. The prosecutor spent the next hour presenting evidence in a methodical and devastating manner. He showed photographs of the basement where Eleanor was held. The shocking images depicted the dirty mattress, the bucket in the corner, the marks on the walls. Some of the jurors visibly flinched at the photos. He showed medical reports detailing the state in which Eleanor was found. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, bruising, deep psychological trauma. Then he played the security recordings, the footage of Megan living normally during the 15 days, going out shopping, hosting friends, laughing. And then the most damning recording of all, that phone conversation where she coldly said that the problem would solve itself in a week when her mother-in-law finally passed. The silence in the room was absolute. Only the sound of the rain beating against the courthouse windows broke the heavy silence. Ryan looked at the jurors. Their expressions were of shock and growing outrage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the prosecutor continued, This was not an impulsive act motivated by stress or a moment of temporary insanity, as the defense will try to claim. It was a deliberate, premeditated act, executed with calculated coldness. Megan Santos Miller knew exactly what she was doing. She threatened the housekeeper to ensure her silence. She created an elaborate web of lies. She forged medical documents claiming her mother-in-law had dementia. She planned to take control of millions in property and bank accounts, and when her mother-in-law stood in the way of these ambitious plans, she simply decided to eliminate her in the cruelest way possible. After the lunch break, the witness phase began. Carla was the first to be called. She took the witness stand, visibly nervous, but as she began to speak, her voice gained strength and conviction. She told everything she had witnessed: Megan's threats, the muffled sounds from the basement that she tried to ignore out of fear, the trays of food she was forced to leave at the door, the key hanging from Megan's neck like a macabre trophy. "I regret every day that I didn't report it sooner," Carla said with tears in her eyes. "But I was so afraid for my children, for my survival. Mrs. Megan made me believe that if I spoke up, I would be punished too, that I would be arrested with her. And I'm a single mother, I need to work. But today I know I should have been braver. I should have found a way to help Mrs. Eleanor, and I ask for her forgiveness for not doing so." Dr. Paula Mendez testified about the critical condition in which Eleanor arrived at the hospital. She described the injuries, the dehydration, the trauma. Then it was the psychologist Juliana's turn, who spoke about the treatment she had been providing Eleanor over the past few months and how the trauma had profoundly affected her mental health. Detective Charles Fisher testified about the investigation, the evidence collected, the discovery of the forged documents, and then the most anticipated and dreaded moment arrived. Eleanor was called to testify. Ryan squeezed his mother's hand for a moment before she stood up. "You can do this. I'm here," he whispered. Eleanor nodded, took a deep breath, and walked to the witness stand with firm steps. When she sat down, her gaze met Megan's. The two women stared at each other for long seconds. Megan was the first to look away. The prosecutor approached her gently. "Eleanor, I know it's difficult to relive all of this, but I need you to tell the jury in your own words what Megan did to you." And Eleanor told them. In a clear voice, despite the tears that occasionally fell, she narrated every detail of those 15 days of hell. The initial shock of the assault, the growing fear, the hunger, the thirst, the desperation, the attempts to scream for help, Megan's cruel words, the progressive loss of hope, the belief that she had truly been abandoned by her son. "There were moments when I wished it would all end," she admitted in a choked voice. "Moments when the pain and despair were so great that I thought it would be easier to just give up fighting. But then I would think of my son, of the wonderful man I raised, and something inside me refused to give up completely. Some stubborn spark of hope insisted that he would come back, that he would discover the truth, that he would save me. And thank God he did come back." When Eleanor finished her testimony and returned to her seat, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some of the police officers providing security were visibly moved. The defense tried to present its case, but it had very little to work with. Megan's lawyer argued that she was under immense stress, that she had undiagnosed psychological problems, that the situation had gotten out of control without it being her initial intention, but the argument sounded hollow against the overwhelming weight of the evidence. Megan was called to testify in her own defense. She took the witness stand with a closed expression. When the prosecutor began to question her, she tried to maintain a posture of a misunderstood victim. "I was trying to help," she insisted. "Eleanor was getting confused, saying things that didn't make sense. I was afraid she would hurt herself. So you locked her in a basement for 15 days without adequate water, sufficient food, or medical care?" the prosecutor attacked. "Is that your definition of help?" "I didn't know what to do. I was alone, desperate." "You were so desperate that you went to the mall to shop, that you hosted friends for lunch, that you planned to take control of millions in assets through forged documents?" Megan couldn't answer adequately. Her explanations were inconsistent, contradictory. And when the prosecutor played the recording where she said the problem would solve itself when her mother-in-law passed, she visibly paled. "What exactly did you mean by that?" the prosecutor pressed. "I didn't..." It was just... I was frustrated. I spoke without thinking, she stammered. You were planning to let Eleanor die in that basement, weren't you? That was your solution. Eliminate her, and then claim it was natural, using the fake reports you bought. No, that's not it. But her defense had completely crumbled. She left the witness stand visibly shaken. After 2 full days of trial, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecutor delivered a powerful speech, recapping all the evidence, appealing to the jurors' conscience about the gravity of the crimes committed. The defense made a final effort, appealing for pity, claiming that Megan was also a victim of circumstances and deserved a second chance. The jury retired to deliberate. Ryan, Eleanor, and Henry waited in a private room. The hours seemed to drag on endlessly. 3 hours later, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. Everyone returned to the courtroom. The silence was deafening. The judge addressed the jury foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, replied the woman who had been elected foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated kidnapping, what is the verdict? Guilty. As to the charge of elder abuse? Guilty. As to the charge of attempted murder? Guilty. The list continued. Guilty on all counts. Each word was like a hammer blow, sealing Megan's fate. Ryan felt his mother's hand squeeze his. When he looked at her, he saw tears streaming down her face, but also a faint smile of relief. Megan remained motionless in her chair, her face completely pale, her hands trembling visibly. The judge then pronounced the sentence. Megan Santos Miller, the jury has found you guilty of all crimes for which you were charged, crimes that demonstrate a calculated cruelty and a complete lack of human compassion. You betrayed your family's trust in the most vile way possible. You held a defenseless elderly woman in inhuman conditions, planned to defraud an estate, and were apparently willing to let her die to achieve your selfish goals. Taking into account the severity of the crimes, the coldness with which they were executed, the vulnerability of the victim, and the complete lack of genuine remorse shown, I sentence you to 23 years in prison to be served in a maximum security facility. Furthermore, you will forfeit any and all rights to the marital assets. You shall pay restitution for moral and material damages to the victim in an amount to be determined in a separate proceeding, and your civil rights will be suspended for the duration of your sentence. The room erupted in murmurs. Megan collapsed in tears, covering her face with her hands. Her lawyer tried to console her, talking about appeals, but she seemed to hear nothing. Ryan felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice had been served. Sadness because the woman he once loved or thought he loved had revealed herself to be a monster capable of such cruelty. How had he not seen the signs? How had he been so blind? Outside the courthouse, the journalists surrounded them again. This time, Ryan decided to speak. Today, justice was served. My mother can finally have peace knowing that the person who tortured her will pay for her crimes. But more important than punishment is awareness. How many elderly people right now are suffering silent abuse in their own homes? How many families are ignoring the signs? This case isn't just about us. It's about all the vulnerable people who don't have a voice. I hope our story inspires other victims to come forward and inspire society to better protect those who need it most. Eleanor also wanted to speak. I forgive Megan, she said, surprising everyone, including Ryan, not because what she did was acceptable. It wasn't. It was monstrous, but because carrying hatred and resentment would poison my own soul. She will pay her debt to society. I choose to move forward with love and gratitude for having survived, for having my wonderful son by my side, for having a second chance at life. In the months following the trial, Ryan and Eleanor dedicated themselves to consciously and deliberately rebuilding their lives. Ryan drastically reduced his workload. He promoted a trusted partner to vice president of the company and delegated responsibilities he once insisted on handling himself. He realized that the empire he had built meant nothing if he didn't have the time and health to enjoy life with the person he loved. He implemented a completely new routine. Every morning he had coffee with his mother. They talked about everything and nothing: politics, literature, childhood memories, plans for the future. They relearned how to be present for each other, not just physically but emotionally. Twice a week they went to family therapy sessions together with the psychologist Juliana. They worked together to process the trauma, to strengthen the bond that had been so brutally tested, to establish healthier foundations for communication. Eleanor returned to doing the things she loved. She joined a book club in her new neighborhood. She started baking her famous brownies again, but now she also experimented with new recipes. She began watercolor classes, discovering an artistic passion she had never explored before. She made new friends with other ladies in the neighborhood, creating a social support network that extended beyond her family. Ryan, for his part, started dating again after almost a year. He met Beatrice, a kind and attentive architect, at an art exhibition. She was divorced, a mother to a 10-year-old girl, and had been through her own personal battles. They connected through a mutual understanding that life was precious and fragile, that one shouldn't waste time on what didn't truly matter. When Ryan introduced Beatrice to his mother, he was nervous. The memories of Megan were still recent and painful. But Eleanor welcomed Beatrice with genuine warmth, and the two women quickly developed a relationship of mutual respect and affection. "She's different, son," Eleanor said after their first meeting. "She has kindness in her eyes, a kindness you can't fake." Eleanor's law, as it came to be known, was passed by Congress a year and a half after the trial. The legislation significantly strengthened penalties for crimes against the elderly, created more efficient reporting and protection mechanisms, and established oversight programs for nursing homes and institutions. Eleanor was invited to attend the bill signing ceremony. It was a moving moment to see something so positive born from such a personal tragedy. Ryan sold his construction company for a very high price. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need the title of a successful businessman to validate his existence. He invested the money wisely, ensuring financial security for generations, and dedicated himself to projects that truly mattered. He created a foundation in his mother's name, the Eleanor Miller Foundation, dedicated exclusively to combating elder abuse. The foundation offered free legal support to victims, maintained a 24-hour abuse hotline, funded temporary shelters for at-risk seniors, and ran awareness campaigns across the country. 2 years after the trial, on a sunny spring morning, Ryan and Beatrice were married in a small, intimate ceremony in their garden. Only close family and true friends were present. Eleanor was the matron of honor, radiant in a lilac dress. Beatrice's daughter was the flower girl, scattering petals down the aisle. There was no ostentation or unnecessary luxury, just love, simplicity, and gratitude for that moment of genuine happiness. When Ryan and Beatrice exchanged vows, their words were about true commitment, about being present in difficult times, about building a family based on respect, honesty, and compassion. At the reception, Eleanor made a moving toast. "My son, my daughter-in-law, dear friends and family, 2 years ago, I was in the darkest place one can imagine, literally and metaphorically. There were moments when I thought I would never see the light of day again, but I survived. And not only did I survive, I thrived. I learned that life is too precious to be wasted on the wrong people or the wrong priorities. I learned that true wealth is not in bank accounts but in genuine hugs and meaningful conversations. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it means freeing oneself from the weight of hatred. And I learned, above all, that true love is not measured in grand gestures, but in the small daily choices to be present, to listen, to care. Ryan, you saved me that terrible night, but in the months that followed, I learned that you saved me every day by choosing to be by my side, by choosing to include me in your life, by choosing to love me actively and presently. Beatrice, welcome to our family. May you build a marriage based on these simple but profound truths that we learned through so much suffering." There wasn't a dry eye among the guests. It was a powerful testament to resilience, to choosing life even after facing the darkest valley of death. The years passed. Life followed its natural course with its ups and downs, as all lives do, but now there was a solid foundation, a deep awareness of what truly mattered. Ryan and Beatrice had a son, a boy named John Charles, in honor of the grandfather he would never know. Eleanor became the most dedicated and loving grandmother one could imagine, present at every important moment in her grandchildren's lives. Megan was serving her sentence in a penitentiary upstate. Ryan learned from Henry that she had refused all visitors for the first few years. Then she began intensive therapy within the prison. She wrote a letter asking for forgiveness, which Ryan read but chose not to answer. Some wounds were too deep to be healed with words, and he had learned that forgiveness did not necessarily mean reconciliation. It meant self-liberation, not an obligation for a relationship. The Eleanor Miller Foundation grew to become a national reference in the fight against elder abuse. It helped thousands of families, saved countless lives. Eleanor's case, which was initially a private tragedy, became a catalyst for significant social change. On a warm December afternoon, 5 years after that fateful dawn, Ryan was sitting in the garden watching his mother play with her grandchildren. She was 78 now, but she seemed to have a renewed vitality. She laughed loudly as she chased the children in a game of tag, her face illuminated by the pure, simple joy of that moment. Beatrice sat down next to him, lacing her fingers through his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how strange life is," Ryan replied. "About how something so horrible brought us to this beautiful moment. It's not that I'm grateful for what happened. I never would be. But I'm grateful for what we chose to do afterward, for the changes we made, for the priorities we reordered." "Suffering can either destroy or transform," Beatrice said wisely. "You two chose transformation. And you're a part of that, you and Sophia. You completed our family in a way I didn't even know I needed." Eleanor came to sit with them, the children running inside for water and cookies. "You know, son," she said, her gaze distant but serene, "there are days when I still wake up scared, thinking I'm in that dark place. But then I open my eyes and see the light coming through the window. I hear the sounds of a house full of life. I smell the coffee brewing, and I remember that I survived, that I'm here, that the darkness is in the past, and that each new day is a gift I choose to open with gratitude." "You're my hero," Ryan said, hugging his mother. "We're each other's heroes," she corrected. "That's how real families work." The story of Ryan and Eleanor did not end in that dark basement. In fact, in many ways, it began there. It began with a choice not to let evil win, not to let one person's cruelty define the rest of their lives, to rebuild on the ruins with something stronger, more authentic, more conscious. They learned that material wealth does not protect against tragedy, that luxurious mansions can harbor unimaginable horrors, that titles and professional success mean nothing without real presence and true connection. They learned that presence is the greatest gift one can give to another, that love manifests not in grand declarations, but in small daily acts of care and attention. They learned that silence should never protect abuse, no matter how embarrassing or difficult it is to speak up. That reporting is an act of courage, not betrayal. That protecting the vulnerable is everyone's responsibility, not just the authorities. And they learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that to forgive is to set oneself free. That moving on does not mean forgetting, but it means choosing not to let the past hijack the future. The sun was beginning to set over New York, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside that simple but love-filled house, a rebuilt family gathered for dinner. There was laughter, lively conversation, plans being made. There was vibrant, pulsating life. And at the heart of it all, there was a simple but profound truth that sustained every moment. True love remains. Through the most violent storms, through the darkest nights, through the most painful betrayals. The love that truly matters, the love that builds and sustains, that love remains, grows and transforms into something even stronger after being tested by fire. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ryan and Eleanor has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of pain, resilience and reconstruction, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what struck you most about this story. Was it Eleanor's courage, Ryan's unconditional love, or the powerful message about valuing who truly matters? Every day, we bring intense and true stories like this one, which reveal the deepest and most complex side of the human soul, that make us reflect on our own choices and relationships. We'll see you in The next episode with another story that will stir your emotions.